Viewer discretion is advised.
Danny Paul Bible, known as the ICEPICK Killer, was an American serial killer, serial rapist, and child sexual abuser who committed 4 murders and numerous rapes between 1979 and 1983. In May 1979, Bible was watching television at his home in Houston, Texas, when he was visited by 20-year-old Inez Deaton, a neighbor and friend of his cousin who wanted to use the telephone. Upon entering the house, Bible immediately grabbed her and demanded that she have sex with him, which Deaton refused to do. In response, he forcibly tore off her clothes and started raping her. But as she resisted, he started strangling and eventually resorted to stabbing her with an ice pick. After stabbing her 11 times in the head and chest, Bible put the body in his car and then drove to a nearby bayou where he abandoned it. Deaton's body was found on May 27th by a passerby. She had no pants and her underwear had been partially torn and her legs had been spread open by her killer. Shortly after Deaton's funeral, Bible fled Texas and moved between Montana and Wyoming, where he married a woman. The union proved to be abusive, as Bible often physically and sexually abused her. On May 16, 1983, Bible broke into the apartment of 21-year-old Pamela K. Hudgens, a relative of his wife who lived in Weatherford, Texas. Unaware that she was being visited by her friend, 20-year-old Tracy Zan Powers, who also brought her 4-month-old son Justin, Bible proceeded to bludgeon all 3 of them to death. He then put the bodies in the trunk of his car and drove to the nearby town of Mineral Wells, where he discarded the bodies in different locations. Almost immediately after the killings, Bible fled Texas yet again, abandoning his wife's car at an airport in Midland. His exact movements for the next couple of months are unknown. On December 2nd, he was in Belgrade, Montana, when he decided to go to the home of Leanne Miller, an ex-girlfriend. Once he knocked on the door, he was let in by the woman's babysitter as she recognized him as her employer's ex-boyfriend. He then proceeded to tie up both women and rape Miller's 11-year-old daughter before stealing some valuables from the house. In November 1983, Bible was charged with the murder of Hudgens, as this was the only one of the 3 cases where authorities judged that they had enough evidence to put him to trial. Facing charges both in Texas and Montana, Bible instead traveled to Spokane, Washington, and from there to Florida. In late January 1984, he was arrested in Fort Myers, Florida, after a routine check, and not long after that, he waived the extradition proceedings. It was decided that he would be tried in Texas first, and he was promptly transferred to that state a few days later. In August, Bible pleaded guilty to Hudgens' murder and was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment. The authorities lacked evidence to charge him with the killings of Tracy and Justin Powers, and the inability to establish a cause of death for either of them ultimately led to him not being charged at all. At the same time, he was convicted and sentenced to 20 years imprisonment for the Montana case, but was allowed to serve his sentence in Texas. Following his conviction, Bible was imprisoned at a prison in Rocheron to serve out his sentence. In January 1992, a personal tragedy would come about after one of the 7 children he had with his first wife, 15-year-old Timothy Martin Bible, was shot and killed during an altercation with a police officer in Juanetta, Florida. News reports state that on January 30th, 21-year-old police deputy Paul Kurzweil went to the mobile home of Celsa Bible, where she lived with her 7 children, to arrest Timothy on outstanding charges of forgery and failing to appear in court. When he arrived there, he was informed by one of the older brothers, John, that Timothy was playing at the bridge of the nearby Juanita Farms drainage canal. Kurzweil drove to the designated location and attempted to apprehend the teenage boy, who instead started running away. In the ensuing chase, Timothy drew a .25 caliber handgun, prompting Deborah Kurzweil to shoot him in the head. The entire ordeal was seen by an unnamed witness who later testified on the deputy's behalf, claiming that he saw the teenaged Bible pulling the handgun out. The shooting was ruled to be in self-defense, and Kurzweil faced no charges for the incident. In 1993, Bible was released on mandatory supervision after serving 9 years of his original sentence. He moved in to live with some of his family members in Montana, and over the next 5 years, he would periodically sexually abuse 5 of his nieces of various ages. This would continue until November 8, 1998. On that date, he was visiting Port Allen, Louisiana, and decided to break into a randomly chosen hotel room. The room he chose was occupied by a woman named Tara Robinson, who he proceeded to physically and sexually assault before attempting to stuff her into a duffel bag. Before he could do anything further to her, Robinson scared off Bible by warning him that her boyfriend would come soon, causing him to flee. A warrant was issued for Bible's arrest shortly afterwards, and on December 16th, he was arrested by the federal authorities in Fort Myers, Florida, and extradited back to Louisiana. While awaiting trial for the rape charges there, he spontaneously confessed to the murders he had committed in Texas and at least 9 rapes. 2 weeks later, detectives from Texas were dispatched to interrogate him from his jail cell in Louisiana.
I can see blood on the side of her neck. I can remember grabbing some bags and placing her in the bags and taking her to a car. Did you kill her? Yes, sir.
Finding his confession to be sufficient for a murder charge, Bible was charged with Deaton's murder and extradited back to Texas to face trial. In June 2003, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after just 3 hours of deliberation, after which he was sentenced to death. Less than a month after his conviction, on July 18th, Bible was involved in a car accident that almost killed him. On that date, he was being driven to the state's death row at the Polunsky unit, when a pickup truck driving along the U.S. Route 190 accidentally swerved off the road and hit the prison van in a head-on collision. The crash caused 2 fatalities: 40-year-old prison guard John Bennett and 65-year-old Ruth Anglin, the driver of the pickup truck, and injured 3 others: Bible, the second prison guard, 45-year-old Stephen Gardner, and another motorist, Sheena Bates, who crashed into the back of one of the vehicles. Gardner and Bates suffered minor injuries, while Bible broke one of his vertebrae and required a surgery. While he survived the ordeal, he was left physically impaired and would experience frequent severe headaches and blackouts. Over the following decade, Bible and his lawyers submitted multiple appeals to have his death sentence commuted, with his final one being rejected by the Supreme Court in 2016. At a press conference held on March 12, 2018, District Attorney Kim Ogg announced that she would sign a death warrant for Bible, as she considered him to be an example of the worst cases that deserved the death penalty. This motion was the subject of objection by Bible's attorneys, who argued that their client should be executed either via firing squad or nitrogen hypoxia due to his health issues. In response, Assistant Texas Attorney General Stephen Hoffman said that this was simply an attempt to delay the execution, and that Bible's medical treatment showed that there would be no issue to find a vein suitable for IV insertion. It was nearly 40 years ago when the brutalized body of 20-year-old Inez Deaton was found in a field near a deserted car wash in Harris County. For about 2 decades, her murder went unsolved. Because of his poor health, Mr. Bible has severely compromised peripheral veins, meaning it will be difficult, if not impossible, to establish 2 functioning IVs in his veins, creating a substantial risk of either a botched execution or an aborted execution attempt, wrote one of Bible's attorneys, Jeremy Sheppers, in his appeal to the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals Friday. On Wednesday evening, Bible, a 66-year-old in a wheelchair who claimed his veins would not handle a lethal injection, was put to death for Deaton's murder. He uttered no final words. The execution team was able to insert a fatal dose of pentobarbital into his bloodstream at 6:17 p.m., and 15 minutes later he was pronounced dead, according to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The Houston Chronicle reported that Bible, who had IVs inserted into his hands instead of the crook of his arm as usual, trembled from Parkinson's disease and muttered, "Burning," and "It hurts," before falling silent and losing consciousness. Some criminals' actions are so heinous they earn the label worst of the worst, Ogg said in a statement after Bible's execution date was set in March. The jury who listened to the facts and saw the evidence of the crimes Danny Bible committed clearly reached that conclusion by sentencing him to death. The brother of Pamela Hudgens, another one of Bible's murder victims, said after the execution that Bible was a vile and evil person. "We are glad to have witnessed him draw his last breath," Larry Lance said in a statement provided by TDCJ. "I know that he will burn in hell for eternity." Bible was the second person to be executed under Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, a Democrat elected in 2016 who has drawn in the reins on the death penalty in the county that has sent more people to the execution chamber than any state aside from Texas itself.